everyone. Delighted to have you here and to participate in this service. And I have a special opportunity to showcase one of the ministries that I have been involved in for some time. But before speaking of my own activities, Ray, this is not advancing. Ray turned it on.
Is it powered on? Let's just cycle power on it. Let's see if that'll try it now.
There we go.
Yeah.
I have a 30-year perspective. As your eyes scan all of these ministries of this congregation, you will see that there are some that perhaps those that are newer to the congregation might not know what they mean, like GNU. Or that this congregation in part was founded to serve the military community, being located specifically as a ministry on this side of the military bases. And as your eyes continue down, you'll see that we've had a rich history of outreach. And at the bottom, I have listed the things that we're currently involved in. And the last line particularly I draw your attention to, in that the facilities here have been used for others who have opportunity to reach the world and help promote growth and discipleship. The last three that I have listed there, World Bible School, Let's Start Talking, and World English Institute, are three that have similarity. They've all outreached either using correspondence material or people that go and teach. The last two, Let's Start Talking and World English Institute, have particularly attracted people by offering to teach them English. I pressed too long. Much too long. Okay, there we go. I'd like to introduce you in about 15 minutes to the World English Institute ministry. There are two websites, and I'm not going to spend a great deal of time because there's an opportunity for you to go to World English Institute net. Their other site is .org, the working site, but the .net site gives you a great deal of background and information, and the ministry as it was before the internet. On the right-hand side, you see a picture of the leaders, several of the leaders. Dick Adey, particularly the older man at the top right or left. Dick is a evangelist who also was a missionary to Taiwan, and he's the author of a large set of lessons, the teaching material, and these were also developed as correspondence courses. And across the world, particularly in Eastern Europe and in Africa, these materials are currently actively being published and used as the teaching materials. Then the idea occurred to those leaders, just as God used Koine Greek to spread the gospel in New Testament times, to use English in the modern world to spread the gospel. Many students enroll in World English Institute in order to learn English, but they study the Word. Their interest gradually shifts to studying the Bible. How many of you remember life before the internet? I suspect that there are some in the room here that, including my granddaughters, who might not know life without this machine. The world has changed so much that you can be a missionary now from your kitchen table. The 2024 statistics show the growth of this evangelistic tool. And this last year, there were 800 people that served as teachers in World English Institute, teaching over 88,000 people in 200 countries. 330,000 grammar lessons were taught. Those are actually these books right here that attract students. No one is misled, however. They are informed from the very beginning that they're going to be studying their English lessons by using the easy-to-read Bible. And as you see, the last number there, 550,000 Bible lessons were submitted during the last year. Now there's an interesting link between the past and the future in that the materials that are being used throughout countries have local national evangelists that are using those materials, and they provide a resource to the internet side of this ministry. In addition, there are a number of members that organize themselves for short-term missionary outreach efforts. I think we all know that Jesus left this world with instructions to us to go and make disciples, to baptize and teach, and that the examples of sowing seed or for the apostles collecting them together to be fishers of men is a command that I have had since I was baptized when I was 11 years old. And we know that we're instructed to bear fruit. And I have learned through my involvement, particularly with World English Institute, that the quote of Paul in Corinthians, "I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow," has really become apparent to me. The work that we do on the internet is followed up often by local evangelists and ministers and Christians reinforcing and engaging in a personal way. I would observe that most of my 70 years as a Christian, I felt guilty that I wasn't doing enough. And I realized that probably all of us in this room might, as you kind of think of where you've put your time, most of it's been spent very internally on supporting the local congregation, and we took great satisfaction when our financial resources were used to support an individual who would go into a foreign mission field to work, or even to Washington, D.C. or San Francisco to be a missionary in those communities. And I call this our holy huddle. Our comfort level is strongest among people who think like us, who worship like us, people who need to grow. And that is part of the mission, to teach and make disciples. It's not just outreach to those that are unchurched. It's to support those who are, like all of us, on the journey of life and need to have a close family that supports our love for Christ. This is the website that is seen as people identify that they want to learn English. They're informed in this first panel, this opening page, that you will have an English native speaker, not an English major, that will be working with you. People are attracted through Google advertising and Google search. The platform organizes the work of teachers and protects both students and teachers from intrusion, a type of encryption that protects. And as a result, this tool allows us to go into dangerous parts of the world. And I've experienced that of people who would risk being discovered, and particularly those who might even be put to death if they were found studying the Bible. One of the neat features is that the teacher selects the students. So you have an interest in a part of the world or a person or people of certain faiths like Muslims, you can select those that you think you would like to work with. The lessons are really taught by the automated part of all of the written material. And there are explanations for the questions that are answered incorrectly on the tests that are provided each student. Might go back here and say, in a typical hour that I spend working with this ministry, that maybe 10 minutes of that time would be spent in what I call student acquisition and maintenance. And there is a lot of effort that goes in over time in discovering those who want to learn English, but also want to stay and study their spiritual opportunity to follow Jesus. And then it has surprised me that I can handle 10 to 15 students and respond to where they're at and what they have submitted during the remaining part of that hour. So this is my history, my 5 years of doing this ministry, starting my 6th year this month. And I took this data and rounded it to kind of show you what can be accomplished through this ministry. Well, I claimed a lot of students, over 1,600. About every other student would stay with the program. That is, they took an introductory lesson and got immersed into both demonstrating they knew enough English to be, for this ministry to be useful to them. They had to score at least 40% on this introductory test. It also showed that they would be studying spiritual questions of the Christian orientation. And out of those that I claimed, 900 accepted the first lesson set. And because I could select, I found that my pattern over a 5-year period, although I've had periods where I say I really want to know what it's like to work with a particular religious persuasion that I didn't have a lot of personal knowledge of. My numbers are 63% Christians, 17% that didn't declare what their religious orientation was, or none, 13% Muslims, and 7% Buddhists and Hindus and Jews, very few Jews. Now from this, the process, often because this is at the pace the student can have interest in, can take 3 months for them to get through the basic Bible course. It's called either the elementary or intermediate English course, and students are placed based upon their score. If they get 70% there in the intermediate. So I have a measurement here of how many continued to the advanced course. And there were 300 that advanced to that. I guess probably the most amazing part is I've had 140 home Bible studies. Now these numbers are descending, that is, you take from the pool at the top, the 900, and it became 300 for advanced, and then 140 continued. And I'll explain in a moment that 40 graduated, but that means something different today than it did 5 years ago because courses have been added that are elective. And I've had students that have been with me 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I've had some of those students that started basic Bible that gave up and then they came back, and it's a joy when I see students reappear. This is the material, and on the left side is the basic Bible course, the conflict between good and evil, the king is coming, the King has come. And so on the left side, it is paired with the English lessons. And one of the things that is good about the course is that it attracts a lot of people, but also it frightens us who would be teachers in saying, I'm not so good, sure I'm good with nouns and pronouns and things like that. However, my experience is I spend less than a minute teaching grammar to an individual student when he returns a grammar lesson. And when the students advance, that you can see the titles of these, it's much more the New Testament church being taught, along with instruction on how to take the test of English as a foreign language. And many are eager to learn English so they can advance themselves, some hoping to gain entry into jobs that require an official test, which is not offered by World English Institute. This is to prepare students, all for free. And I've noted there in the middle that the lessons are scored by computer, and most of the questions are already answered by the author's explanations that come along with the lessons when they're returned to the student. And this is the typical course of my day. I watch on the left there students, and they've told me that this is about the pattern they go through. They read the lesson, they listen to the lesson. All of the lessons have narration with it. Some repeat that cycle in reverse or many times over, and then they take a quiz. And in the middle, you'll see that there's a listing there, and those are the people waiting for me to respond. They're organized in a way that allows me to pay most attention to those who are perhaps the ones that are just getting started and they need the fastest response and the most encouragement. And I have discovered that my role is really to engage, to encourage, and really in some respects, my role minimally is to teach. On the right-hand side is the last part of each one of the questionnaires or the quizzes that are taken. The student answers questions. I can see pretty quickly if they have really understood the lesson, that is, they have comprehension of reading and listening to lessons in English. And today, with so many language tools, electronic, it's different than it was even 5 years ago with how occasionally I'll find a student who I've thought, well, this person is pretty accomplished with the English language, and really their grammar has been corrected and their spelling has been corrected by the computers that they're using. And in the last year or so, with AI developing, some even attempt to do the entire course through artificial intelligence, where they're gaining very, very little, but others are very dedicated. You'll see at the top part the word correct, and that was a part of my initial role, that you could take the student's response, it would automatically copy into a blank space that followed their answer, and you could go in and correct the English with the tools that were above, strike through words that were in the wrong place and that sort of thing. I probably spend less than 5% of my time in any of the English language support. You go back again. But the last question is a broad question. It says, once you've got, what was most important to you from the lesson? And this is where I have opportunity to teach. Although I really would regard my teaching as encouraging, the lessons teach, and just the magic of people persisting over time to read lesson after lesson and gain from it. And so the challenge that I have often is to find or discover something about the student that would allow me to respond. And I usually caption it, my thoughts, and I will respond, usually with trying to encourage the student or redirect them in a gentle way. There's also an internal email system, so I'm not exposed on my computer or cell phone to any direct communications. That's part of protecting the teacher and the student. And here's the home Bible studies. Course on God, which is a real challenge, and you gain a lot of insight when you're working with a Muslim student. You know, they regard Jesus as a prophet to be regarded, but not as divine. And they have no belief in a Trinity because that's more than one God. And some of the things that I've learned along the way is how to work with people who hold strongly different views and how not to lose them from the process. And I found it really delightful learning experience for me to begin to understand the other dominant faith systems, belief systems in this world. The Living for Jesus courses, Jesus teachings, and Sermon on the Mount. Let me back up again. I'm too eager here to advance. And you can see where I have noted after the fourth lesson, students would graduate. And it is amazing to me how sending a certificate to a student via email is a coveted thing that people want to have. So after each of these courses that I've described, we will acknowledge that they have successfully completed the course on God or the Living for Jesus. In the years that have passed since I started this, everything in blue there has been added, including at the bottom an online Bible. And just to imagine that we have the access, and people in dangerous places in the world now have access to all of this material. I'd like to tell you a little story. I was pretty resistant to the idea that my brother and sister-in-law had because they started supporting World English Institute when it was just a correspondence course, just like World Bible School. But this was in a kind of a pre-publication period of time where those that were close and involved with this ministry received from Dick Adey, who wrote this pamphlet, this book, this monograph on blessed assurance. And it spoke to me. And it opened my heart to say, even as a preacher's kid who's been a church-going, worshiping person for 80 years now, it opened my heart to understand I'm a saved person. I shouldn't have doubt. And if any of you have any doubt, I have extras of these books that I'd be glad to give to you for your own study. This is one of my first students who had been studying when it was a paper system. And I learned that indeed there were local people who would deliver certificates. And this individual had requested not just to print off from the computer, he wanted his own certificates hand delivered. And Jean in Haiti delivered the graduation, diploma of graduation in Advanced English and Bible. This is touchy. And about a year later, I was working with a woman in Cuba, the Isle of Youth, which is off of the west coast of Cuba. I learned that she was very devout. She was studying intensely on her own and in a school. She received from me one of the World Bible School $5 Bibles that we in the past have distributed here. There's an embargo on mail to Cuba, has been since that crisis back in the 60s. We found a way to get it to her. And then she sent me this picture, which really touched my heart. I've been changed. I have the opportunity to share Jesus every day. Well, I've traveled the world. I see a lot of places that I couldn't put on the world globe at all when I started, and now they're common to me. And I experience many who are seeking Jesus, and I would say that that is probably one of the early things that I learned, that these people who in some ways are kind of anonymous because you don't know their skin color, the slant of their eyes. You may have suspicions because of the area of the world you're working with. But reading their essay answers, I concluded they're just like me. Real people in real places with real lives, seeking to better themselves and seeking Jesus. And I learned. And I'm humbled with the excitement that many had in circumstances that are so much different than my own, where I have comfort. Some of you have seen 80. 80 is the mother of a son who was stationed at Fort Lewis. He drove a tank. He emigrated to the United States as a teenager from Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is 2 countries up from Afghanistan. And 80 and her granddaughter that she came here to meet and I have become friends. And Leonard Ott and I went to meet her the first day because I thought I was meeting a Russian. But she was Asian, Kyrgyz. I've learned so much from 80. She has a great skill, raised as a communist youth, went to St. Petersburg to Russian University. Heavy finger here, sorry. I also discovered there are Christians in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is a small country, sort of like Switzerland in terms of mountains ringing the valley that they're in. Discovered that a person that was of the Christian faith decided that she wanted to learn English, got her entire Bible class to sign up. I had 7 students. And when 80 returned to be with her family for a visit, she met Utma. Utma's of a Baptist background. Her husband's is an evangelical Christian. And 80 and Utma and their family connected. And the way that this relationship works over the years is that you can get pretty close to some people. And in this case, Utma has a 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, and a few weeks ago she added a 3rd child. And that picture is of a child that was either going to be named Moses or David. They chose David. I'm not quite sure how it would work in a Muslim country to have a child named Moses. You know, I've had a different series of experiences because we often think of this as foreign mission work. But here in this country, there's opportunity. Many have immigrated here and wish to have English language skills. Like the woman who said, I married an American, now I need to learn the language. Here I go again. So in this slide, just this past January 14th, Mark wrote to me. And you can see just above the box there that he wrote, this whole journey with WEI started off as being skeptical. What are they doing with my information? Then it feels like a chore. Oh, this again. I feel like work. I'm tired. I want to go to bed. I'd rather be doing something else. And then in the box, I've lifted out some of his comments. I have found Church of Christ members, other Christians, benefiting from this course as a read-only course, not taking any of the English language training. And I enjoyed and passed along to the leadership of World English Institute his response. And as you've read through it there, as I've spoken, I really appreciated that after 2 years of his study and exchanging comments with each other, that he felt that we were not a cult. And that's the work that can be done through World English Institute, not just in some foreign land, but in Washington, D.C., in San Francisco, in the Puget Sound area. So this is my testimony that I leave with you tonight. In 5 years, 900 people have been touched. That probably dropped to about 600, perhaps. I did a study at one point, being curious as to where did people give up? Where did they decide the English was too hard, or they really didn't want to study the Bible? But I know that 300 wanted to continue, and that beyond that, another 140 of that group wanted intensive study of the Bible. And I've learned about nations that I didn't know were on the map. I've learned about beliefs and practices. There in the first line in that block where I'm talking about how I've been changed, I mentioned the YMCA. I have the opportunity to go to the Y every day. And on Friday, a man walked up to me that I've been talking with, and he says, I've decided I need to go back to church. We'll have more conversation now. I also spent nearly a year with a devout Muslim that was working on converting me. And it's different to have that personal experience. But just as you have your world of contacts in life, my ministry at the Y is that I think everyone that talks with me knows that I'm not a hidden Christian, that they can trust me to have a conversation and not demean them or condemn them or look down on them. And I've learned some interesting things about people and religious practices, like in Ethiopia. Do you know how the Christians worship there? And it has challenged my own faith. Like, what do we believe about how we should observe the Lord's Supper? Or more complicated doctrines such as the Trinity. And I'm sincerely humbled to realize that people are voluntarily committing often several years of their life to seeking the Lord. Well, you can see there I used a person picking up barbells. This does take effort. So you may have questions like, how much time does it take? Is it effective evangelism? Is it right for me? And it was right for me. My wife had passed 7 years ago. 5, there, I have turned it off. Ray, can you bring it back for me? And so I was in a space where I was looking for the next chapter of my life. It was a hindrance in some respects, but when I was visiting with my brother and my sister-in-law said, well, you've asked me, do we have any books on the Holy Spirit? And I can direct you to the Holy Spirit as part of the 3-part course on God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And she says, I can give you access to that by registering you as a teacher, but you don't have to teach anyone. It gives you that resource. And it was because I had read Dick Adie's book on being confident in your salvation, and I enjoyed his writing, that I said, okay, Jan, sign me up. I've resisted you for years. And she signed me up, and while we had time during that visit, I read his pamphlet, his monograph on the course on God, and I thought, this feels good, this feels safe. And I took 5 students. I vowed I'd never do it. Before I left there, I'd taken 5 more. And I quickly learned that you take 5 to get 2 was kind of the phrase that was used. But I soon felt that all of my life spent in the holy huddle was somehow being changed, and I've described that, and it was right for me at the circumstances that I was experiencing, and it has filled my life now. And from that visit in 2020, I returned, and a week later, we were on quarantine, pandemic shutdown. And soon I was taking bunches of students. I found a student in Egypt, and this was a very educated man. And I asked, why are you taking the course? He says, I want to do something useful. And I could relate to you and occupy the next hour with stories that have moved me, with surprises. You know, God is working in the background. I've really come to believe that. I have seen things that couldn't be coincidence. Jim at one of his life group meetings made the comment about God has put people in my way or along my path. And I think that is some of what I would share with you. You would be surprised the number of things that were not coincidences. And just like the food pantry and other things that we do to help the community, I see value in the English language being taught. And I'm not doing hardly any work at all, and I'm not intimidated by it. Occasionally I have to admit they ask a question of me that I have to read the author's explanation myself to say, well, why does English grammar work that way? Or why do we use so many idioms in our language? In fact, I don't know how people ever come to understand the way we talk with so many phrases and references to historical events. And I'm so sensitive now as I listen to our conversation and to things on the news to say, I can't comprehend how anyone without a deep background in American culture could understand what in the world we're talking about. And I've learned that my role is not the complete role, it's to sow seed. So do the work of telling the good news. Our journey is preparing us for eternity. And I'm very much touched, and particularly as I've been identified by students as an older man, and then an old man, and then more recently an elderly man, with this comment or statement by Paul to the young evangelist Timothy. I have fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I've kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. I only have a few more years. Some of the rest of you in this room have many years ahead. And as I look back, I think my life has been well spent, and I don't feel guilty. I particularly do not feel guilty now that on the day of judgment, I believe the Lord will not say to me, "Who are you?" Whatever stage of life you're at, whatever your desires and efforts are, be a soul winner for Christ. You don't need a big education or a lot of life experience to share your devotion and your conviction that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. You can go to this website, World English Institute net, and learn more about this ministry. You can talk with me. You might even find some excitement from me. Consider that this is not just for other people, that I have watched a Christian man in Tennessee, a member of the Church of Christ, who for 2 years studied through World English Institute. He was also a reading-only student rather than an English student. This can be a resource, part of your library, part of your resources. Dick Adey is a skilled and wonderful writer. And you, like me, might just be captured. You might want to experience sowing the seed around the world. And I have 2 last observations, and then the lesson is yours, and we'll follow with a song. One observation is that I've resisted, thinking I was unprepared to do door knocking, home evangelism. As I aged, I found that excuse didn't work very well in my own heart. So often there would be moments where the assembly, the congregation got excited and said, "We want to do things in our community, but I need more education." And so we would offer, a 3-month training you to be working as an evangelist, but not at the level of a preacher, but skilled enough that you convince someone else of your faith. Can't you do that today at whatever level you are at, whatever level of confidence you're at? And what I've observed is that after people stepped out and said, "I want to do this," and they attended a class, that soon that energy dissipated. They couldn't find students. The door knocking was hard. When I was a youngster, I thought I could earn some Christmas money by selling Christmas cards door to door. And I've been damaged ever since with doors slammed in my face. I don't like rejection. And so most of us have an excuse, or maybe even a reason, to not move forward with sharing Jesus. It's a skill that can be learned by taking some risk and getting out of your comfort zone. My second observation is that there are 346 students waiting as of 1 o'clock yesterday when I prepared this slide. And I would just observe that this is the first time really in my life that there was no lack of students. Now you had to find them, because probably if my experience and ratios are right, about half of those won't continue. But somewhere there is a gem. And I found gems that I think were presented to me by the Holy Spirit to work with. There's a song that I've asked be sung next that captures some of the feelings that I have, and I've just taken a few of these words, and then we will turn this over to a song leader. I think, Jim, you're next, is that right? Okay. So we've heard the joyful sound, and some of the words that I picked out are these phrases: spread the tidings all around, Bear the news to every land. Tell to sinners far and wide, by his death and endless life, Jesus saves. Let the nations now rejoice. This our song of victory. Jesus saves. Jesus saves. Thank you for your kind attention. Jim?
We have heard